Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. 2 years ago, I bought my dream house in a quiet neighborhood with an HOA. I know what you're thinking. An HOA. Voluntarily. But the community had excellent amenities, well-maintained common areas, and the rules seemed reasonable when I reviewed them. Plus, the house itself was perfect, especially the backyard. It came with a stunning in-ground pool that the previous owners had installed just 3 years earlier. When I say stunning, I mean it was the crown jewel of the property. Curved edges, underwater lighting, a small waterfall feature on one end, and elegant stonework surrounding it. The previous owners spared no expense, and while it definitely bumped up the purchase price, I considered it an investment in my quality of life. For the first year and a half, everything was great. I got to know some neighbors, kept my property up to code, and enjoyed my private backyard oasis whenever the weather permitted. I work from home as a software developer, so having that pool just steps away became my perfect lunch break escape or post-work relaxation spot. Then I met her. The neighbor I'll simply call HOA Karen. Karen lived about 4 houses down and across the street. She wasn't the HOA president, but she was on the architectural review committee and never let anyone forget it. My first encounter with her happened when I put up a small garden trellis for my climbing roses. Within hours of installing it, there was a knock at my door. "That trellis is unauthorized," she informed me without so much as a hello. "You need to submit a form to the committee." I apologized, genuinely not realizing I needed permission for something so minor, and promised to submit the paperwork right away. I figured it was a reasonable misunderstanding, but that was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, I received notices about my garbage can being visible from the street. It was behind a bush, barely visible. A garden hose left uncoiled for approximately 2 hours. The shade of white I chose when repainting my fence, apparently not the right shade of white. Each time, the notice had Karen's signature at the bottom. Each time I complied, though with increasing eye rolls when reading the violations in the privacy of my home. I'm not confrontational by nature. I believe in picking my battles, and none of these seemed worth the energy of fighting. I just wanted to live peacefully in my home and enjoy my pool. That brings us to this past July, specifically the Saturday of 4th of July weekend. The temperature had been hovering around 95 degrees all week, and I'd been looking forward to 3 days of alternating between air conditioning and pool time. I'd even invested in some new pool furniture and floats to make my mini staycation perfect. That Saturday morning, I had a video call with a client in Europe, which is why I was working despite the holiday weekend. The call ran long, about 2 hours, and I was in my home office on the 2nd floor, which faces the front of the house, not the backyard. With my noise-canceling headphones on and focused on my screen, I was completely unaware of what was transpiring in my backyard. When the call finally ended around noon, I decided it was pool time. I changed into swim trunks, grabbed a towel, and headed downstairs. That's when I first noticed something wasn't right. There was music playing. Not loud enough to have been audible upstairs in my office, but definitely music that wasn't coming from my sound system. As I approached the back door, I heard voices, multiple voices, laughter, splashing. I opened my back door and froze in complete shock. My backyard was full of people. Not just a couple. I'd estimate there were at least 20 adults and maybe 10 children. Music was playing from a portable speaker someone had set up on my patio table. Coolers that weren't mine were scattered around. People were swimming in my pool, lounging on my new furniture, and was that someone using my grill? For a solid 30 seconds, I couldn't move. I genuinely wondered if I had somehow stepped into an alternate reality where my private backyard was a public pool. Then I spotted her, Karen, in a wide-brimmed sun hat, holding a glass of what looked like sangria, directing someone where to place a platter of food on my outdoor dining table. I stepped out onto my patio, still trying to process what I was seeing. A few nearby guests glanced at me with mild curiosity, but quickly returned to their conversations. They didn't even seem surprised to see me, the owner of the house they were partying at. I approached Karen directly, trying to keep my voice level despite my rising blood pressure. "Excuse me," I said, "what exactly is happening in my backyard?" Karen turned, raising her eyebrows slightly as if I'd asked a silly question. "It's the neighborhood 4th of July pool party," she explained, her tone suggesting this should have been obvious. "In my pool? On my property?" I clarified, thinking perhaps she was confused. She laughed lightly. "Well, your pool is the nicest in the neighborhood, and you hardly ever use it. Seems a shame to let it go to waste on a holiday weekend." I looked around again, noticing more details that made my jaw clench. Someone had moved my pool floats from the storage bin and distributed them. Children were playing with pool toys I'd never seen before, presumably brought by guests. A woman I'd never met was helping herself to my outdoor mini-fridge. "I use my pool regularly," I replied, my voice tightening. And even if I didn't, that doesn't give anyone the right to use it without my permission. How did you all even get in here? Karen waved her hand dismissively. The gate was unlocked. Look, the HOA bylaws encourage community building and resource sharing. It's just a friendly neighborhood gathering. I took a deep breath. The HOA bylaws do not give anyone permission to use private property without the owner's consent. This is my house, my backyard, and my pool. I need everyone to leave. Now. Karen's expression hardened. Don't be so selfish. Everyone's already here and having a good time. You can join us if you want, but you're ruining the holiday spirit with this attitude. By this point, some nearby guests had noticed our conversation was becoming tense. A few were watching with uncomfortable expressions, while others deliberately avoided looking our way. This isn't about holiday spirit, I said firmly. This is about trespassing. I didn't authorize this party. I didn't invite any of you. You need to tell everyone to leave immediately. Karen's face flushed red. You know what your problem is? You don't understand community living. When you buy into an HOA neighborhood, you're agreeing to be part of something bigger than yourself. I agreed to follow reasonable rules about property maintenance and community standards, I countered. I did not agree to let strangers use my private pool whenever they feel like it. A man approached us, presumably Karen's husband. Everything okay over here? Karen turned to him with an exaggerated eye roll. Our antisocial neighbor is making a fuss about the party. Apparently he thinks his pool is only for him. The husband looked uncertain. Karen, did you actually get permission to use his... Oh, for goodness sake, she cut him off. The HOA board approved a community pool party. I mentioned we'd use the best pool in the neighborhood and no one objected. This was news to me. Did you specifically tell the board you were planning to use my pool without asking me first? Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. That's what I thought, I said. I'm going to say this one more time. This party is over. Everyone needs to gather their belongings and leave my property now. Karen crossed her arms. And if we don't? I remained calm. Then I'll call the police and report trespassers. She scoffed, pulling out her phone. Go ahead. I'll call them myself. Let's see what they say when I tell them an HOA-approved community event is being disrupted by an uncooperative resident. She actually started dialing, which honestly surprised me. I stood there equal parts furious and bewildered as she put the phone to her ear. Yes, hello, I need to report a disturbance, she said into the phone. We're having an HOA community pool party and one of the residents is causing a scene, threatening people, and demanding everyone leave the community pool area. My mouth dropped open at her blatant misrepresentation. I pulled out my own phone and started taking photos and videos of the party, the people in my pool, using my furniture, the coolers, and food set up on my patio, quietly documenting everything while Karen continued her fabricated report. Yes, that's right, she continued. The address is... And she gave them my exact address, confirming to the dispatcher that this community event was happening at my private residence. After she hung up, she gave me a smug smile. The police will sort this out. I suggest you calm down and stop making a scene before they arrive. I just shook my head. You realize you just called the police to my address, right? To my private property? Where you and about 30 people are trespassing? It's not trespassing when it's an approved community event, she insisted. I decided to stop arguing and wait for the police. I continued taking photos and videos, occasionally checking the time. Some guests were starting to look uncomfortable, whispering among themselves and glancing between Karen and me. A few quietly gathered their things and slipped out, clearly sensing something wasn't right about the situation. About 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived at my front door. I met them there and invited them to follow me to the backyard. Karen immediately rushed over, launching into her version of events before the officers could even assess the situation. Officers, thank you for coming, she began breathlessly. We're having our annual neighborhood 4th of July pool party, and this man, she pointed accusingly at me, is trying to shut it down and threatening everyone. One officer looked around at the scene, then back at Karen. Ma'am, who authorized this gathering? The HOA board approved a community pool party, she stated confidently. At this specific location? The officer clarified. She hesitated. Well, we decided to use the best pool in the neighborhood. The officer turned to me. And you are? I'm the homeowner, I replied calmly. This is my house and my private pool. I never gave permission for this party, was never informed about it, and only discovered it was happening about half an hour ago when I came downstairs and found all these people in my backyard. The officer nodded. Do you have proof of residence, sir? I pulled out my driver's license, which showed my current address. I can also show you property tax records on my phone if you need further verification. The second officer had been observing the party guests, many of whom were now hurriedly gathering their belongings, sensing the tide turning. "Ma'am," the first officer turned back to Karen, "did you get explicit permission from the homeowner to hold this event on his property?" Karen's confident demeanor faltered. "The HOA board?" "The HOA board doesn't have authority to grant access to private property without the owner's consent," the officer interrupted. "Even in an HOA community, a private residence and its yard remain private property." The realization that she was in the wrong was visibly dawning on Karen's face. Some color drained from her cheeks, but she made one last attempt. "But he never specifically said we couldn't use it," she argued weakly. The officer gave her an incredulous look. "Ma'am, that's not how property rights work. You need permission to enter someone's property, not the other way around." The second officer addressed the remaining guests. "Folks, it appears this gathering doesn't have the homeowner's consent. I need everyone to collect your belongings and leave the premises immediately." The exodus that followed was a mixture of embarrassed mumbles, apologetic glances, and some irritated looks, directed not at me, but at Karen. Several guests approached me directly to apologize, claiming they'd been told this was an approved venue for the neighborhood party. She told us the homeowner was away for the weekend and had agreed to let the community use the pool, one woman explained quietly as she gathered her children's toys. "I'm so sorry. If I'd known, I never would have come." Karen, meanwhile, had moved from denial to indignation. "This is ridiculous," she huffed to the officers. "He's being completely unreasonable. We're neighbors." "Neighbors respect each other's property," the first officer replied firmly. "Ma'am, once everyone has left, we need to discuss the issue of your call to emergency services. Making false reports is a serious matter." That shut her up quickly. She glanced at me, perhaps hoping I'd intervene on her behalf, but I simply watched as the party guests filtered out of my yard, leaving behind a mess of plates, cups, towels, and displaced furniture. Once the backyard was clear except for Karen, her husband, who looked like he wanted to disappear, the two officers and myself, the police officer, addressed her again. "Ma'am, you called 911 and reported a disturbance, claiming the homeowner was threatening people at a community event. Instead, what we found was unauthorized use of private property, essentially a trespassing situation. Do you understand how serious filing a false police report is?" Karen's husband spoke up. "Officer, I'm sure my wife didn't intend to file a false report. There was a misunderstanding about—" "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I interjected. "She knew this was my private property. She deliberately organized this event without my knowledge or consent, and when confronted, she doubled down and called the police with fabricated accusations." The officer nodded. "Sir, do you want to press trespassing charges?" I looked at Karen, who had finally lost her smug expression and now appeared genuinely worried. Her husband looked mortified. Not at this time, I decided. But I do want this documented in case of any future incidents, and I want to be clear that neither Karen nor anyone else has permission to enter my property without my explicit invitation. The officers took down all our information and filed a report documenting the incident. They advised Karen that while she wasn't being charged today, the report would remain on file and any similar future incidents could result in criminal charges. As they escorted Karen and her husband out, I surveyed the mess left behind. Empty cups floating in my pool. Food residue on my patio furniture, wet towels draped over chairs. It would take hours to clean up. But this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, I emailed the HOA board with a detailed account of the incident, attaching several photos and videos I'd taken. I requested an emergency meeting to address what had happened and to clarify HOA policies regarding private property. The response was swift. The board president called me personally to apologize, assuring me that the board had never approved the use of private pools for community events. They had approved a community celebration at the neighborhood clubhouse and pool, a completely different venue that Karen had apparently deemed inadequate for her plans. The emergency meeting was scheduled for the following evening. I prepared a concise statement outlining the events and my concerns moving forward. When I arrived at the clubhouse, I was surprised to see nearly half the neighborhood in attendance. Word had spread quickly about Karen's pool party fiasco. The board president opened by addressing the incident directly, making it clear that the HOA did not and would never authorize the use of private property without owner consent. Then Karen was given an opportunity to speak. She had apparently decided that a partial apology combined with justification was her best strategy. "I apologize if there was a misunderstanding," she began, emphasizing the "if" in a way that made it clear she still didn't think she was entirely in the wrong. "My intention was to build community spirit and provide a nicer venue than the community pool. I should have been more explicit about the location when discussing the event with the board." The board president interrupted. "To be clear, Had you been explicit about using a private residence without permission, the board would have immediately denied such a request. This wasn't a miscommunication with the board. This was an unauthorized action on your part. Several neighbors spoke up, many expressing embarrassment at having participated in what they now realized was essentially breaking into my property. A few directed pointed questions at Karen about why she had misled them regarding my consent. By the end of the meeting, the board had taken several actions. Karen was removed from the Architectural Review Committee, effective immediately. A formal written apology from the HOA would be sent to me. Karen was required to cover the cost of professional pool cleaning and patio furniture cleaning. The HOA rules were amended to explicitly state that private property, including pools, could not be used for community events without written consent from the owner. Karen received a formal warning that any similar incidents would result in significant fines. The aftermath brought some unexpected positive changes to my neighborhood experience. Several neighbors who had previously avoided interaction with me, likely due to Karen's influence, now made efforts to introduce themselves properly and establish friendly relations. I was invited to legitimate community events at the clubhouse, and people went out of their way to respect my privacy and property. As for Karen, the public humiliation of having the police called to remove her from my property, followed by the HOA board's formal censure, significantly deflated her neighborhood power trips. She now gives my house a wide berth when walking her dog, and I haven't received a single petty violation notice since the incident. I did make one significant change to my property. I installed a high-quality security system with cameras covering my backyard and pool area, along with a more secure gate lock. I also put up a small but noticeable sign by the pool gate. Private property access by invitation only. Video surveillance in use. It was within HOA guidelines for signage, and the board had no objections when I submitted the form. Properly documented, of course. This summer, I'm enjoying my pool more than ever. The water seems just a bit more refreshing, the privacy a bit more complete, and the satisfaction of having stood my ground against neighborhood entitlement makes every swim just a little sweeter. Sometimes I look at the security camera footage on my phone while floating in the pool, raising my glass in a silent toast to the empty yard and the complete absence of uninvited guests. Lesson taught, case closed, and yes, I definitely came out on top. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Cast, Grace, our main character girl, Jane, the evil one, Professor, the instructor of the course. Story. At first, Grace and Jane got along just fine. They were both interested in similar stuff and quickly became BFFs. Grace decided to show Jane her sketches and designs for handbags and purses, and Jane was so impressed by it, because the sketches were in incredible detail, including all the patterns and sew lines coupled with figurative measurements. Even Professor was impressed by it, and it was no surprise that Grace got a high mark on their first major exam. Jane didn't do so well and practically followed Grace everywhere to get pointers on how to do better. So Grace decided to help her out. Unfortunately, Jane turned out to be one of the most entitled, lazy, and selfish people that Grace has ever met. Things that Jane did to piss Grace off included, but not limited to, not paying attention, being late on their study session, never showed appreciation, didn't pay for coffee or snack, complaining annoyingly about how hard it was to draw something Grace pretty much gave up on her after a week, refusing to meet Jane outside of her class. Time went by, and for their midterm, everyone in the class had to do a presentation on the stuff they had designed. When it was Jane's turn, Grace was shocked to see Jane had stolen one of her designs. Thankfully, Grace had multiple designs going on, so there were no conflicts when it was her turn to present, but she was seething with rage. Grace had a meeting with the professor afterwards, and the professor knew what was going on, but couldn't really do anything with Jane because it turns out she was the daughter of the chairman, or one of the major investors. Grace said she can't recall. The chairman apparently blackmailed the professor into giving Jane the best grades. The revenge? Professor did, however, help Grace devise a plan to humiliate and expose Jane. For the finals, the professor announced to the class they would do another presentation, but it would be 3 designs and advised they had to bring their A games because professionals from industries would be grading their work, and the head of the department and the chairman would be there as well. So, you know how Grace had a bunch of sketches for the class? Well, Grace also had a separate sketchbook that had designs from major brands. MK, Coach, you name it. She never used these directly for class assignments, but rather as inspirations for her designs. Grace pretended to be all friendly with Jane again, and brought the other sketchbook on their meetings, still putting up with all the problems mentioned above. Grace secretly worked tirelessly on her new design, and did her best to keep it a secret from Jane. So the day of the final presentation arrives, and Grace and Professor are grinning because they know what is about to happen. Grace went first, and she got a lot of praise from the judges. After a few more presentations, the last one to go was Jane. Jane's presentation turned out to be another copycat, copying designs of not one, not two, but 3 different companies. After the presentation, this was how it went all down, at least according to Grace. Judge 1. So you are saying you designed all these by yourself, right? Jane. That's right. Judge 1. And you swear that it really was your design and didn't copy off from anything else, right? Jane. I swear, Judge 1. You are aware your designs are from 3 brands? Jane. Huh? Judge 1. Are you aware that these are on market right now and some of the most popular designs? Jane. Wait, hold on. Judge 2. Yeah, I was going to bring this up. If you had worked for any brands, you would have probably been fired or, worse case, sued Jane. But, Judge 2, please, I am not done yet. Did you honestly think this would work? We, the judges, have been in the industry for over 10 years. We know a copycat when we see it. Jane. But these aren't even my designs. They are from Grace. Judge 3. To Grace. Is this true? Grace. Yes. But I'd never use them for major projects nor call them my work. I just use sketches of them as inspirations for my own designs. Judge 3. Well, that was clear from your presentation. Turning back to Jane. Now, Miss Jane, this is a clear case of plagiarism, and I do hope your school is merciful on this matter. After the presentation was over, the chairman screamed at the professor in front of everyone, not realizing he just revealed all the blackmailing and the secret grade deal. Jane tried to call out Grace on how you screwed me over, but it really didn't matter. No one listened to Jane's attempt and slander and was kicked out of the school. Chairman pretty much lost all support and had to resign and was replaced by a far more honorable and competent one. The next one is a malicious compliances story. I was an ER charge nurse a few years back at a busy facility. In order to increase capacity during busier times, we frequently would bring patients to Hallwaygurnies to be seen by the doctor. It's not a great setup, literally just a journey in the hallway in front of the nursing desk, but if the rooms are clogged with patients waiting on beds upstairs, etc., it's a commonly used workaround. So, one night a few years back, we're busy, and non-emergent patients are waiting for hours in the lobby. I am using Hallwaygurnies to increase throughput. I'm putting stable patients who don't need cardiac monitors into the hallway. So, I bring the next patient from the lobby to a hall gurney. Let's call her Karen. Karen is idioting because she's been waiting hours. Since American healthcare is all about kissing ass and patient satisfaction, I can't tell her that she's been waiting because her medical complaint would be dumb to take to urgent care, let alone an emergency room. We get to the hallway spot, and she pitches a fit. I've been waiting for hours. I deserve to be in a room, not the hallway. And other crap like that. She sees an open doorway to an empty room and demands that we go there. I say that a different patient will be going into that room and explain that Karen doesn't need a cardiac monitor for her visit. Karen crosses her arms and says something like, I don't care, that room is available, so you have to let me use it. I had a department to run, and I was tired of her entitled bullcrap. Pointing at the hallway gurney, I said, Are you refusing to see the doctor in this space? Her eyes lit up, apparently thinking she had won, and Karen said, Yes, I won't be seen right here. I said, No problem. I waved at the security guard a few yards away and said, Hey Tom, this lady would like to leave now. Karen looked shocked, then started saying she never said that. I reminded her that she clearly stated that she refused to be seen in this bed, and so she was going to have to continue to wait in the lobby until a room became available. She tried to backtrack and said something like, Fine, I'll see the doctor here. I just shook my head and said, It's too late for that. You have already refused. Tom will escort you back to the lobby and we'll call you back to a room as soon as we can. Security walked her to the lobby, and she pretty quickly decided to just leave without being seen. The next one is an entitled people story. I'm 28 years old and work at a school, and I really love my job. It's a really good job with little to no issues. Back in November, my coworker, also my friend from outside of work, befriended our new coworker, a 60-year-old woman from Scotland. The woman is nice enough, but to me something feels a bit off about her. My friend decided that we need to take her out to lunch, and I felt very apprehensive about the idea. But I ended up going with them, and it was so boring. I felt out of place with them because they have more in common and get along well. There's no issues with that. I'm fine if we don't have anything in common. But the issue is my friend, we carpool to work, insists every morning that we have to wait for her to walk into work together. She thinks it's rude if we don't wait for her because she always waits for us. There are many of times that we pull up to work and she's there waiting for us. Even when we leave after the workday ends, my friend insists that we have wait for her. Every day, it's always the two of them walking to work together talking, and I'm walking behind them or in front of them. Luckily, my husband calls me on the phone, so that helps me get away from them. A while ago, I was walking into work and she cornered me asking for my Facebook. I wanted to lie and say I don't use Facebook, but I didn't think it was a good idea to lie. She pulled out her phone and opened the app. She said she doesn't know how to spell my name, but the first result on her Facebook search was me. I was a bit weirded out and said, yeah, that one is me. I never confirmed the friend request. Now, 2 days ago, I was walking down the hallway at work and the woman approached me. She asked me with no hesitation, "Why didn't you add me back on Facebook?" I just said to her, "Honestly, I don't go on Facebook," and then she started to awkwardly apologize. I walked away, but I'm so weirded out by the whole encounter. The other thing that weirds me out is if we don't wait for her, then the woman comes into my room as I'm in the middle of working with my coworkers and checks to see if I made it to work. She would even comment about me making it into work. For me, I find it to be weird and unsettling feeling, but my friend thinks she's an innocent woman that needs us because she's from a different country. But I find her to be a bit clingy and overbearing. She also complains about the US constantly and how much she hates it here. I asked her before she moved here did she ever visit to make sure she likes it. She said that she didn't think of that and just moved here. My husband and I are doing long distance as we wait for our visa, so I'm familiar with the visa she's talking about. Some time ago, my friend and I rushed home because we both had appointments we needed to attend to. My friend and I made it to her car and our coworker texted my friend, "Why didn't you wait for me?" My friend started to find this all weird, but today she insisted we need to wait for her. She said yet again we're rude and not nice if we don't wait for her. So every time after that I excuse myself from them and walking into work while talking to my husband on the phone. My friend said that we should go out Friday after work for Cinco de Mayo to get tacos and drinks. I was so excited up until the moment she said she's going to ask our coworker to join us. Then I said, "Oh, I was hoping if it can just be the two of us." And my friend said, "I can tell you don't like her." I said, "No, it's not that we're just very opposite." My friend then said, "I notice you like to hang out with immature coworkers and my friend is mature." The two girls she means are 26 and 23, and they are girls I always talk to. I said, "Well, I have more in common with them since we're all closer in age." After, to end the conversation, I stated that I'm just too opposite from this woman. My friend then said, "Well, she's invited and I'm not changing anything. I don't know what to do now. Do I just go and try to have fun? If I stay home, I feel like it would be an issue, but at this point, I don't feel like going. Anyway, thank you for watching.